Morning, Rod.
Good morning.
This is John Onrick and Rod Flowers, and it's my great pleasure to talk to Rod today. Rod works for SunTrust and consistently cranks over $6 million a month and is way up there and has been for a long time. Rod, before we get into your professional career, most of the contemporaries out there, they always want to know a little bit about your background and where you came from, went to school, and just how you got into the business. The reason is everybody has a unique story.
Well, I grew up on the Eastern Shore in Salisbury, Maryland.
Which is where? Near Ocean City?
Near Ocean City, about a half an hour from Ocean City. Went to college in Baltimore at Towson University, then graduate school at Loyola College to get my MBA. So I was in Baltimore for about 15 years, and then I was asked to take a mortgage position on the back in the Eastern Shore, coincidentally, to help revamp the mortgage business down there. It wasn't doing real great, and it was a little bit chaotic, so I thought I would do it for 2 years, and that was almost 15 years ago. The way I got into the mortgage business is a senior vice president of Loyola Federal Savings and Loan remembered me through sports. I used to play I was a 4-letterman each year in high school and a 3-letterman each year in college, so this person kind of knew me from growing up back in Salisbury, and I guess he felt that discipline through sports could be applicable to the business world, I guess. So
I think it is, actually.
Yes, and it is, truthfully. So I decided back then, again, I figured I'd take the job for 2 years, learn something I don't know, get paid for it, and then decide what I want to do in the future, and that was about 24 years ago. So,
I find it a little bit unusual that someone with an MBA goes kind of directly into the mortgage banking business. You don't see that too often.
Well, really, I'd gotten my MBA in marketing with that was my emphasis, and then a minor in finance. Since I was in banking per se, my first 5 years in banking as a branch manager, we were asked to do mortgages as well. We were actually asked to go out to the real estate offices. We were probably one of the first in the country to actually proactively call on realtor offices.
And this is with Loyola Federal.
This was Loyola Federal, and this was back in 1977 that they started making us do that. They would send letters we had to send a memo to the senior VP of the lending division every Friday, and then every Monday he sent a letter out to those offices saying, I understand Rod Flowers was in your office last week. If you had any questions, call us, as kind of like a double check to make sure we were going out to the offices. So that's how I kind of learned under fire about how the mortgage business worked. And because that proactive calling on the agents, we were the only guys doing it, our volume grew tremendously, and that's how I learned the mortgage business.
It's kind of like a commercial version of the Jesuits watching over your brain and manipulating you.
That's right. Well, then after I managed one branch for 3 years, and then was promoted to another branch about twice as large for about 3 years, and started getting my MBA, and that's when they branched off into the mortgage loan originator, loan officer position that was on commission. Since I was in the midst of getting my MBA, I decided not to do that and stayed as branch manager at my branch so I could continue what I'd started, thinking that I would go into advertising marketing because I'm fairly creative. And so when I did that, I was promoted downtown to VP of the Advertising, Marketing, Public Relations Department. So I did that about 3 years, and then the senior VP of that division is the one that called me after work one day. He was from the Eastern Shore, and he said, well, do you ever think about going back to Salisbury? We need some help down there on the mortgage side, and you know it. And I thought about it for about a week and decided not to take it. And it's just like a test, sometimes you don't realize something until you verbalize it. And as soon as I said no, I got that sick feeling in my stomach. I just made the wrong decision. I was missing an opportunity. So about an hour later, I called back and changed my mind. They had already booked 2 interviews with other loan officers. I said, well, that's fine. What's fair is fair, and if it works out, it was meant to be. And they still chose me, and like I said, I promised my wife we'd come back to Baltimore in 2 years, and things worked out, and it's worked out well.
I find that a little bit interesting, and I'll tell you why. It's ironically, I know a little of the history of Salisbury and Ocean City and Ocean Pines and some of the places down there. And ironically, when I sold computers for IBM, it was in Baltimore, so I know Baltimore well too. Which leads me to this question: well, why would you consider going from an area, I won't necessarily call it the high price spread, but where the average volume amounts or loan amounts, I'm sure, were higher, into Salisbury, which, while it has some depressed areas, also has some very nice areas, as you know. I'm sure the loan volumes were just much lower than where you were coming from.
Well, I wasn't really, didn't really think in those terms. It was really the fact that I was making so little money as a VP of marketing that, you know, I always felt that I could do more than just what I was doing in this 9-to-5 job.
Sure.
And I mean, I was always doing things. I always had a second job. You know, my first years as manager, 5 nights a week, I was a waiter or a bartender. And then when I worked downtown, I was always trying to start little businesses on the side, whether it was, whether it was Amway or A.L. Williams Life Insurance or whatever. I just had energy. And then when they told me about this position, I looked at the potential volume and asked what the potential volume was from the senior VP of the lending division, and backed in from that commission structure and said, okay, well, I only have to do X amount of dollars to make more money than what I'm making now. And
so it was a very rational decision, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and then I realized I'm missing an opportunity. This is my chance to, you know, just take off. And, you know, am I really what I think I'm worth? Now's my chance to prove it. Instead of being boxed in a salary structure, you know, and it's kind of frightening, I guess, for a person to go on commission,
sure,
and especially back when you were only getting 1/4 of a point as your commission structure. You know, so I said, well, I'm not worth it if I can't at least take a chance and back up what I think I'm worth. And, you know, I'll never know unless I try it now.
Now don't tell me they paid you 1/4 point when you went to Salisbury.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I find that interesting. I've never worked for 1/4 point.
With no overage.
With no overage.
Right.
I love it.
It was pretty, you know, I knew no different then.
Yeah, sure.
I wasn't, sure. I hadn't been in the mortgage world on this typical commission structure. So now, even at a year and 6 months, my wife tapped me on the shoulder one day. We were driving. She goes, "Hey, pal, we got 6 more months, and we're back across the bridge." You know, well, in those last 6 months, I did the mortgage for the principal, one of our teachers, and, you know, another teacher I went to school, I grew up with for one of my other kids. And so it turns out we realized we have great control over the influences of our children. Plus, the word of mouth was spreading for me dramatically over that first year, because it was. I mean, I called people the first 3 months. I moved down by myself while we were trying to sell a house in Baltimore. I called people up to midnight, Monday through Thursday, because there was such a backlog of files in here that and every industry was experiencing. It was, you know, it was busy. Nobody was ramped up. Didn't have enough employees. So I called people up to midnight. That was my cutoff. And believe it or not, there wasn't one person that ever got mad. They were just thankful somebody was calling them and telling them what was going on. So it was quite a mess to walk into a nice, organized, complacent, to leave an organized, complacent situation in the marketing department, and to walk into what was really total chaos. I just couldn't believe that existed at Loyola Federal. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. But down on the Eastern Shore, the word of mouth spreads very quickly. You know, if you do a great job, it really helps you. If you do a lousy job, it'll put you right out of business. Unlike in the metropolitan areas, you can do a lousy job and there's 100 more waiting around the corner. Likewise, too, if you do a great job, the word doesn't spread that well because you're a nobody. But down here, you can be a somebody.
And quickly.
Yes.
Did you have any formal training when you went down, or it was like, you know, hit the road? And
Right. It was just hit the road. It was mainly what I remembered from my first 5 years. So, and that was, you know, that first 5 years had been 4 years ago. But the ratios were still the same, you know, basically 28-36. And lending is a lot of common sense. You know, does a guy have job stability? You know, I often look at it as, and what I used when I started out as I was relearning the guidelines, generally I looked at it and said, would I lend this guy my money, my own personal money? You know, that's how I evaluated credit reports, and that's how I looked at the job stability. I knew you had to stay in the same line of work for the last 2 years, basically, back then. So, I just read my guidelines each night. I might read a couple pages each night, which was a hint given to me by one of the senior officers in the lending division. Said, just break it down, read 2 pages of Fannie Mae every night, and plus look up that night any situations that you came across during the day that you're not sure of. Mm-hmm. And that's what you try to do. So
now I tell you what's sticking in my mind, a couple things. One of them, I'm sure I will not be forgiven if I don't ask this, because there's a lot of people horror-stricken out there on this quarter point. At what point did you realize that there really you can get a half point out there?
Not for a long time. I mean, truthfully, not for a few years, to tell you the truth, mm-hmm. because I never really have compared myself to other people. Or what others are getting. Unlike the ball players nowadays, they all want to be the highest paid. When they would print out the production reports, I never looked at the production reports. Never. I might look at it one time or twice a year, and that was it. And obviously I looked at it at the end of the year when it was given to me, and they give the awards or whatever, but I'm always trying to do the best that I can do. That's one thing I learned through sports. You're not really competing against the other guy, you're competing against yourself. That's what is your true potential? And it's just like at a Todd Duncan seminar a couple years ago, Peter Vidmar, who's the only gymnast to win a medal in the all-around competition in the Olympics, he hit it right on the head, and this is just how I've lived my life. And he says, how could I beat all these other guys? There are no extra hours in the day. Everybody's practicing till they drop. He goes, all right, so I just practiced an extra 15 minutes every day. And that he won by like 1/100th of a percentage point.
That's right.
That got him. Well, I think of myself back in sports. I always stayed after practice in every sport I did, except baseball, because you need somebody to stay after to hit you the ball or to pitch to you. But in wrestling, gymnastics, football, I always stayed after practice, whether I was punting the football or just throwing at a pole because I was quarterback, or practicing my moves in gymnastics, or practicing takedowns, getting my hips close in against the wall. I always practice an extra few minutes, and that's what I do at work. When I walked into here in 1986 and I saw all these files all over the place, I just said, okay, we've got to break it down. And that's what Peter Vidmar says. You always break everything down to make it more attainable. You don't go for the touchdown, you go for the first down. So when you got 15 cases sitting in front of you, and like the refi boom of 1993, 1 month in March I did 165 applications. Well, you can't do that. Well, you do them like Greg Frost says, one loan at a time. Mm-hmm. And I would look and say, okay, I'll just get this loan done and then I'm going home. And I get it done and say, well, let me just look at this one more case, this other case. And then you do that, and first thing you know, you've gone through 5 or 6 cases. So by just breaking it down, you can make everything achievable, and that's how you just keep going and going that way, and you're doing the best you can do. And, only when a buddy of mine from Baltimore faxed me the commission sheet of a guy he worked with in 1993, about 3/4 of the way through 1993, during that refi crush, he faxed me this guy, the king of the overages, he called the guy, and that's when I saw...
Should we ask his name?
No. That's when I really realized, what these guys were getting, because we still weren't getting overages. We couldn't get overages at that point. We didn't get them till like 1994 or 5. So, but I never really thought about that, and that didn't bother me, because what the staff, eventually learned how I operate, and that is that I'm not looking to make the buck on this deal. I'm looking to satisfy the customer on this deal, because that customer is my referral source for the future. And that's how I got the word of mouth down here. Pretty much everybody knows I will bust my butt to get the case done. And that, there's a famous thing, there's a restaurant and a bar right across the river, right across the street from us. And a lot of realtors go over there on happy hour on Fridays, and quite often the lights are on here, at 6 or 7 on Friday night. And I've often gotten feedback that the saying over there says, there's Flowers up there, he's still working on those cases. So, you lead by example. What do they say? If you set the example, you don't have to set the rules. Well, they know that I will give it my all, and the word spreads, and they know they can trust me.
Well, what advice would you have? I think you've already given it, but if you had to encapsulate it, for the new loan officers that are starting off, I'm not saying necessarily the first day, but, those are in that first 6 months period that can be so difficult.
Well, it is difficult, especially now. I mean, it's really tough now because, you've got the internet, you got the in-house lenders, and, to be a rookie on the street, it's like, oh, God, here's another loan officer, So you just gotta wait for that window of opportunity, and you just take it and run with it and do the best you can do, whether it's a problem, a crappy loan that somebody's given you to test you because nobody else could do it, or if you just happen to be at the right place at the right time. You just never know when that little crack is going to appear. It's kind of like, I picture it as like a halfback looking for the hole, between the guard and the tackle or whatever. Just looking for that little bit of daylight and taking the ball and running with it and trying to, and just doing the best you can do and learning and knowing how to follow up without being a pest, but just doing, just keeping there's a lot of little blocking and tackling that you can do. Like, one of the ways I started was, I was just thinking, how can I build my business? Well, when I got a deal from a realtor, I'd look at the listing agent who I didn't know, and I said, well, how can I get to the listing agent? Well, I just used my fax machine as a marketing tool, and this is Greg Frost says this too, and that's exactly what I did. I would fax up the acknowledgement. I just took the application. Everything looks great, and I told them when we should have approval and when we could go to settlement, and I would fax that not only to the selling agent but to the listing agent, in hopes that not only will the listing agent see it, and with every piece of paper and every acknowledgement from me that holds true, I'm increasing my credibility in their eyes, but hopefully somebody in the office will see this, and say, they'll get it off the fax machine, they'll yell across the office, say, hey, Jane, here's a fax from Flowers over at Crestar, or SunTrust, and there's a little bit of advertising for me,
I find that, I do a lot of interviews, of course, and I'm sure there are other loan officers, because I only talk to the top people that do this, but you're the first one to articulate that, and I find that very interesting because in every interview there's always some new piece of information that people out there can pick up and run with, and I think fax, it just sounds like a great idea. Do you do that today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is now. Most of the agents know me, but at least hopefully somebody will see it that doesn't do business with me, even though they know me. Again, every time they see something come across and they see that an agent is dealing with me, it gives credibility to you in their eyes. So that fax machine is a great marketing tool. I want to fax out now instead of just the acknowledgement that I took the app. Obviously, it's not an acknowledgement; it's a pre-qualification or a pre-approval now, as we all know with AUS.
Sure.
So now, what do you do beyond that? You're always trying to take it to the next level. Well, what I do, and luckily my offices are pretty close to my office, so it's not an hour drive to my realtor offices, but not only will I fax through the pre-qualification or pre-approval to the agent, but I'll take that original, which is on our colored banner paper, I'll fold it, tri-fold it, put it in my personal brochure with a company pen, and I'll deliver that to the agent, to their office that evening on the way home. Or the next morning on my way back in. So if they're not there, it's either on their desk, on their chair, or in their box. So why do I do that? Because now my personal brochure is a great marketing piece, number one, and it's got the slick in there that talks about me a little bit and talks about the company. But it's color. It's a high-quality piece to look at, not just a black and white fax that came through.
Isn't it kind of funny that when I was talking with another loan officer on this exact same thing, as a matter of fact, we're talking about faxes, and that is how sometimes low-tech is really better than high-tech. A fax is nothing but a piece of paper going in among millions of others. But as this loan officer pointed out, somebody's got to pull it out, somebody's got to stick it on a table, and people got to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that does one thing. Like I said, the next level, the high-quality color piece, it's the same wording, it's the same piece of paper, but we took the time to take it to them and give them a pen. Hopefully they'll use that pen, or they'll have it sitting on their desk or whatever. You're always trying to take it to the next level and do something a little bit different. Now, also, you don't want to overdo it. So like, I don't want to go in there and call them all the time and say, hey, I'm not going to call them every other day telling them on the Jones case just for an excuse to talk to them, because then you become a pest. You got to read your customer. You got to read the realtor. Some realtors, all they want to do is communicate with you by voicemail and fax. they don't want to talk to you because their time's valuable. One of my best agents, great guy, great personality, he'd much rather talk to me through voicemail because then he can crack his jokes and leave his messages and be on his way, and I can do the same thing back to him. You know, he just called me yesterday to play in a golf tournament in June, but we hardly ever see each other. So now some guys will bug them with the phone calls. They're not going to want to deal with you if you're always calling them. Just give them the scoop and let them be on their way. Get it done. That's what they want you to do. What's the shortest distance between 2 points? A straight line. So.
What about when you're at this level that you're at now? I wondered if you'd discuss the issue of pricing and the fact that the margins have become so much thinner now as time has go on. There's not as much overage out there. Do you run into pricing issues at all?
Sure, all the time. And that's when you asked me about the new loan officers coming on board. In fact, we had a corporate seminar a few days ago, and I ran into a few of the young loan officers the night before, and I told them, I said, just hang in there, fellas. You know, I know it's tough. You know, we're not in a refi boom. There's a lot of competition. I said, but you know, just know your stuff. Be there. Be ready when you get the call. You know, that's why we got pagers and cell phones and all that stuff. I said, and bank your money. I said, I lived on tuna fish and peas for 5 years. You know, because I had no money, but I banked it, and I was always working, and I increased my credibility. So now, you know, I have an option of two ways to go. When somebody's got me beat on price, I can afford to let it go and say, well, you know, they're much better than we are. You know, that's probably the better choice for you. Or I can get real spiteful if I'm in that mood, and I can still undercut the price and take a hit because, you know, I've got a bank account to back it up.
Do you do that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I will.
As part of an overall strategy, I assume?
Actually, half the time it's based on my mood, I guess. You know, I'm very driven, very possessive, and very competitive. So more often than not, I will try to beat that price because I don't want, with the advent of technology, it's hard to, you know, it's very hard to screw up a deal nowadays. You know, it used to be my point of differentiation between me and the competition was my speed and my knowledge. And quite often I still get the call that customers will say, you know, so-and-so said to call you that if anybody can figure this out, you can. Another agent the other day that I'm just starting to deal with said, well, you know, Bill in our office said, you know more than anybody. Well, that's great. So you get that reputation out there, but now with AUS, you know, DU and LP, it's hard, you know, anybody can stick it in the computer and get an approval, you know, and limited documentation. I mean, what can you screw up? So,
what about when you get to self-employed people?
Well,
how do you handle that?
I do it myself. I mean, I've done 30% of my customers are self-employed, and always have been. So I know how to read the tax returns. It's no problem. In fact, if they can get the tax return out in front of them, and I've got them on the phone, I tell them what line to look on. And so, you know, I can pre-qualify them right over the phone, whereas most guys can't. A lot of loan officers hand it off to somebody else to do the financial analysis. You know, and it's a simple addition, subtraction calculation. You know, it's nothing complicated to it. So, you know, self-employed doesn't intimidate me whatsoever. In fact, you know, that's probably where I can talk to them on their level, because having tried to do a few businesses in the past myself and filling out the schedules myself and how, you know, doing the tax withholding and all that business, you know, I can talk on their level, and I think they can feel that. So, and I let them know about all the customers I do that are self-employed, so, you know, they know that I'm right on the same wavelength with them. Well, going back to the overage situation real quick.
Yeah.
Yes, I may undercut my price to beat that competitor or to match that competitor, because I don't want to create a crack for my competition, because if they get a foothold in there and they do one, then the realtor learns that, well, he can do it just as good as Rod can do it. I don't want to give them that opportunity. You know, I want to starve them out. So, and with every, you know, it is a game of attrition, because,
yes, it is.
You know, with all these new loan officers that come on board, how long can they last? You know, it's just like running a race. You know, when you're dragging, if you're running a marathon or a 5-mile race or whatever, you might be dragging, but you keep your posture. You don't look behind you, and you keep that same posture like you could go forever, and you want to demoralize the competition. You know, but they want to know, and my competition knows that I will never drop. I'll I'll work 24 hours a day if I have to, and I've been known for doing it, in the past years. But they know that I will go as hard as I can go, and that I won't give up. So there is a mental aspect to the game. So I don't want to give that window of opportunity for anybody to get in there, because eventually I know they'll get demoralized and they will give up, because mentally they're not as tough as me and some other people. So,
how do you, normally I don't get into this till later in an interview, but just by the nature of the beast and the fact that you are a very driven individual, it raises another issue, and that is, how do you especially with the volume you do, how do you manage your time? I think that's going to be of great interest to the people out there with the volume you do.
Yeah, well, everybody still thinks I work 20 hours a day, but I don't necessarily. Sometimes I'm still might be in here till 10 or 11 at night, depending on if there's cases that I need that I want to specifically look at myself. But it took me years to finally realize, to finally get an assistant, because I never understood the assistant concept. Never knew there was one.
Mm-hmm.
All I knew is I was complaining to Loyola about, I need help, and I was so far out beyond everybody else. I mean, my volume was typically like 3 times what this number 2 guy was. So they couldn't even comprehend what I was doing or what I needed. And then finally I just, I just said, I got to get somebody in. I got an ex-realtor to come in just to do some stuff, like we went into laptops years ago. We were like one of the first in the country to do laptops. And luckily I took a typing course in high school, so I can type 60, 70 words a minute, and I was putting all my loans in a laptop, and I realized I don't have one waking free second 7 days a week. This is bizarre. This is crazy. Was not what I was hired for. I can't even get out to the offices. So I finally got an assistant to do data input and to help me with some marketing, because I'm always trying to market. And that's another key thing that you got to do. You have to, if you've got some creativity on marketing, that's another point of differentiation nowadays. Whether it's birthday banners or, a funny birthday card or something unusual, and we can get to that in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to, very much so.
But as far as the hours go, the assistant, and again, I refer back to Greg Frost, because he was like the king of he's got his own tape series, the Assistants program that's published through Duncan. But you got to list out, and I haven't been real great at this, but you got to list out what the responsibilities and duties are for the assistant, because if you don't, now you got something else that's a problem, trying to figure out what they're going to do and what to have them do while they're sitting there, costing you money. So now I have a couple different assistants. A loan officer that's very driven like me, had another territory. I trained him ever since he was an intern in college, and he became a processor. And luckily, having been a processor, and I used to process my own loans my first 5 years, we know the process of the loan process. So that's another advantage over other loan officers. We know the flow, and we know what it takes, what proper documentation you need up front.
Do you pay your own assistant?
Yes. Uh-huh. So,
Frank Donnelly does too, and it's been very successful for him.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if there's a company that really pays for your assistants. I give them a basis point override of my volume, and you can tier that according to the value that they bring to the table. So the assistants are really great. You can have one, maybe you have one that's just a marketing assistant and doing all that stuff, all that communication stuff. I mean, I even had one, usually when I hire a marketing assistant, I even have them do my handwritten cards, because anybody's handwriting is better than mine. So, and I'll have them do everything from that to just making the courtesy call back saying, hey, Rod got your message, he's with customers, can he call you around noon? Just something like that. Or doing the birthday, or doing the faxes and doing the pre-qualification letters, or dropping those cards off, the pre-qualification and pre-approval forms with the pens. All the marketing stuff you can have them do. Well, it turns out my last one that I hired, she got to know the agent so well and has a very, very good personality. She's actually a loan officer assistant for me now. She doesn't do any more marketing because she takes apps, pre-qualifies people. She's learned the system. I mean, she jumped in there much faster than what I expected. So you never know. You just gotta. Now I'm thinking about taking a third on, who is a disgruntled loan officer with a competitor, and again trying to sharpshoot certain agents every quarter, because this person has a very good personality, comes across very professional, and trying to pick off these agents and bring them on board with us.
Mm-hmm.
So, my last one, Ann has already established great relationships with some of my agents that I didn't give enough attention to, and so it's kind of falling right into place. So, I might be in the office, for the past year and a half. A year and a half ago, I made it a goal to eat dinner with the family at least 3 nights out of Monday through Thursday. One night I can spend in the office, and then obviously I'm with the family eating dinner Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. Saturday I might be in here for a half a day. Sometimes it'll be all day. It depends. And sometimes I won't be in here at all. But my pager is always on, and I get between 10 and 20 pages a weekend to pre-qualify people, take applications, whatever. Now, some top loan officers, they brag that they got rid of their pager and their assistants have their pager, and they don't work weekends and they don't work after 5 and all this, but I do, and it doesn't bother me because it helps space out the workload, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being bombarded on Monday, because working in a resort area, there's a lot of activity going on the weekend. So with the advent of computerization, and in-house mortgage lenders, my attitude is you better be ready and available, because otherwise they'll walk down the hall and deal with that guy. So if they can page me and they can get me right away, that's okay with me. It makes me feel wanted and needed, I guess.
Well, what about, do you use a mobile cell phone too? You keep using the word pager, but...
Well, I have a voice pager, so I haven't gotten it. I don't carry the cell phone on me all the time and I don't always have it on. It's just, which I probably will switch very soon, and I probably should, because it's got a pager capability, but I'll have to change my number. But everybody knows my voice pager, which is my beeper.
Okay.
So they can leave a 15-second message, and they know I'll get right back to them. So I just have the pager on me all the time, and I'll just call them from either cell phone or home or the office or whatever.
What exactly do you mean by you'll get back to them pretty soon or quickly? Does that mean you'll do that on a Saturday or Sunday? Or what kind of work habits do you have with regard to that?
Absolutely. I'll get back to them right away. As soon as I can. They know. Quite often they'll page and say, Rod, I got customers in here. Can you try to give me a call back? And if I get that page, I will call them back. If I'm driving in the car or I'm working out in the gym or, whatever, I will call them back, because that's what they've, I think, people want 3 things nowadays: quick response, personal attention, simple solutions. That's how I break it down. If I can provide those 3 things, I'm going to beat the competition. And it's a very simple game. And yes, it might take some of my personal time away, but not too long, because I'm so quick in taking the application. I can take an application in 5 minutes. Have them pre-qualified. They know how high they can go. The app's done in 5 minutes. And I'm not sitting there pecking away in the laptop. I am handwriting an application, but what I do is when the people call me to get pre-qualified, I'm discreetly taking enough information that I've completed an application. By the time we're done in 5 minutes, it's done. They don't even know they did it. So I'm not going to say, okay, let's do the application. Well, they're thinking, oh, Christ, this is going to take a half hour or an hour. While I'm pre-qualifying, I'm jabbing into little questions about their age and how long they've lived here and what's the value of their house or whatever. And at the end, say you qualify for this amount of money. Here's the payment. And by the way, when you find a property, your application is already done. You won't even have to fill out anything. And they go, you're kidding. Nope, it's already taken care of. So I know that if I get paged and I'm at my daughter's lacrosse game, and I did it this past Saturday, I got paged twice, and I did 2 pre-quals, which basically became applications by Monday, because they were making offers that day, and it only took me 5 minutes per call. So
I think there's a lesson for the listeners out there, because and I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently, but we're going to come to the same point in the road, and that is, I found that when I was out there years ago doing my business, that if you were not accessible, there were times you mentioned where people have clients in an office. If you have a good relationship with a realtor and they have somebody there and they can't get a quick response, well, if that happens once or twice, fine, they go to the next person on the list or whatever. But if that consistently happens, where they not only don't get a quick response, they may not get a response for 2-3 hours, sometimes the next morning. At some point in time, you're not on their radar.
That's right. I've had situations where I've called the agent back in 15 minutes, and he already went to another lender. And that's not my loyal realtors, but I blew a chance and if the way it happened is because the pager, I left it in my car Friday night, and I didn't realize I didn't have it sitting there in the kitchen and until about, I don't know, the next morning sometime, and the guy just paged me 15 minutes before. But I blew the chance to establish my relationship with that realtor.
And that's because on the 14th minute, he didn't know if you were going to call for a day.
That's right. And he didn't even think to call, my home or whatever, but I blew my chance. Now, some loan officers will say, I'm not going to let them use me like that, and, I got my personal time. Well, that's fine. I mean, everybody looks at it differently. Like I said, I look at it like they need me. They want me, and I like that. So it's my chance to show my stuff. Now, that goes back to the new loan officers, too. That's going to happen with them. Somebody's going to blow it like I blew it with this guy, and young loan officer, you're going to be available, and you're going to get the call in that 14th minute, and now's your chance to run with the ball, and that will happen. But I'm not going to let it happen, or I try not to let it happen in my area, And I tell you, I will get pages, and not a lot, but there's some agents that work at night. They don't work in the mornings. They like working at night, and I've got a couple of them, and they'll call me at 10:30 at night or page me, and they know they'd try not to do it beyond 10. But if it's at 10:30, do you think they're just calling to shoot the ball? No. They got They got a serious buyer, and they want an answer now because they want to beat that next offer. The inventory is so right at this point in time. That's a shortage of inventory, so every deal's critical, and there might be 5 other deals coming in on that property tomorrow. That's why they call me at 10:30 tonight, so I can fax it through to them.
Yeah, I interviewed Jim Capps, who's you may know him, regional at the Market Street Mortgage and legend up in the Washington area. He told me, we were off the tape, but I believe they have such a shortage of inventory. He told me that he has like 268 people that he is fully pre-qualified that can't find properties. They're just literally sitting to, wait to jump on something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's got that. We've got it here too. I have a whole file drawer full of them. I haven't counted them, but like last weekend, I actually got 2 pages during one of my daughter's lacrosse game. After the game, went into the office to do the pre-qual letters, and I got paged 2 more times. Well, out of those 4 people, 2 of them offered list price. 2 of them offered over list price. The 2 that offered list price did not get the property. That's how, because 5 other contracts came in, and we tried to tell them, you might want to offer a little bit above list price, and said, oh, we don't do that. We'll offer list, okay. So they didn't get the property. But yeah, it's quite a shortage of inventory all over the country, I think. But so too, in that same light, you better be available, because they want to get it done yesterday, not today.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I tell, like when we have college interns in here, that's one of my mottos. I tell them, I say, just like Apollo Creed said to Rocky in Rocky 3 on the beach when he's yelling at him, he goes, there is no tomorrow. And they're absolutely right. There is you better work in this business with a sense of urgency, or else you're going to be, you're going to be left in the dust.
Are there any you said we would get back to this a little bit later. Are there any special tricks? Is not the right word, but nonetheless, one I selected. Are there any special tricks that you use in the business that help differentiate you and you deal with your clients?
Well, luckily, I'm somewhat creative in marketing, and I'm always trying to think of something that's, maybe a little bit off the wall, but not too unprofessional, to try to set myself apart. Like I said, in the past, my speed used to set me apart. When everybody was doing 60 days to get a loan done, I was 45. When they were 45, I was 30. When they were 30, I was 20. Mm-hmm. Now it's a matter of minutes, and everybody can do a 10-minute approval now. Well, one of the other things I've always talked in terms of is I talk in finite terms, and I realized this from buying rental properties and having to do my loans through other lenders, because I only have one with my company. And when they process a loan, I know I'm qualified, but they never told me specifics as to, okay, when are we going to get the deal done? When's it going into underwriting? When can I go to settlement? They'd say, okay, when we get this in and that in, then we'll get it into underwriting, get the approval done, and then you can go to settlement. Well, when? Like I talk in finite terms. We always begin with the end in mind. So that way, nothing falls through the cracks. I have a 4-foot by 6-foot settlement board in the middle of the office. And so when I take an application, I am asking them, what's the proposed hopeful settlement date that you're aiming for? And that is the last phrase I end every conversation, and I mean every conversation with my customers. If I talk to this guy 3 times a day, again, it's going to be my last phrase, my last question at the end of the conversation, so I know where we're heading. And I tell them, okay, we'll have you approved today or approved tomorrow. We'll send the documents out to you. You sign them, send them back. That takes about a week, and by that time we'll have the appraisal in, so we'll have the instructions to your attorney in 10 days, and if you want to move your settlement date up, fine, you just let us know. But I talk in terms, let's say I'm missing the appraisal. Appraisal's supposed to be in 48 hours or 24 hours. I'm always talking in finite terms, so it helps to make the invisible visible to the customer. Because, they only do this a few times in their life. They're in a twilight zone. They're floating out there, and they don't know. And if they don't hear from you, they think you forgot about them.
Mm-hmm.
I did, and I'm in the business. So if you make the invisible visible, what happens next? You tell them what happens next. You're going to get the printed documents. You won't have to fill out a thing. You just sign where it's checked and return it with the items that I've listed on the front checklist. And those items are, if you want to write them down, blah, 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 and you can fax them if you'd like to. And then once I get them back, by that time I'll have the appraisal done, and then we'll have the instructions over to the title company, and you're ready to go to settlement. In fact, I'll call your agent right now and tell him that you're pre-qualified, and I'll fax the pre-approval over today sometime or tomorrow. See, and I'm telling them what I'm doing. So besides talking in finite terms, my marketing aspects, if I see something in the paper where they've, earned CRS or a top producer or whatever, I cut it out, and I have these little, I saw these Dilbert mints. Dilbert, the cartoon character. Well, there's mints out called Accomplish mints, Manage mints, Perform mints. My kids gave me some of these from a candy store at Christmas, and I went, these are really great. So I went on to Dilbert.com and ordered a few cases of them. So I put them, when I clip out the article in the paper, and I put it in a Crestar note card, and I handwrite the card saying, congratulations, great job, hope we can do more business together this year or whatever, and I put those, the clipping of the article and the Dilbert accomplishments in there. And I also got these little note cards, motivational note cards. They're maybe an inch by an inch, and they open up in a flap, and they're from Compendium in Washington State. I got them from that company. I saw them at a Duncan seminar, and I taped one of them in there. Just a little thing. Always trying to don't just send them a card. I'm trying to send them a card that's different, that nobody else would have ever thought to do. Nobody's seen the Dilbert mints. And plus that little Compendium card, nobody's ever seen those things either. Now, here's how you're always trying to take it to the next level. I was talking to one of our loan officers the other day. He's got the Compendium cards, and he puts them in a note card, but he just throws them in the card. He doesn't tape them to the upper flap. I round off the tape, I stick it on the back so you can't see the tape, and I stick it to the top flap when you open up the note card. Well, he also doesn't read the card, the Compendium motivational. And I said, Steve, you better read that stuff. I mean, it doesn't look bad since it's opened a little bit, but you got to open it and match it with the personality of the agent. I said, think about the agent that doesn't like a lot of fluff. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. That's the kind of guy he is. And you're going to get him one that says, let's see if I got one here. When one door opens, when one door closes, another opens.
Yeah.
But we often,
Chinese saying, actually.
Well, here's how the thing goes. But we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the one which has opened for us. Now, do you think this guy wants that? No way. And he started laughing. He goes, God, you're right. I never thought of that. I said, he's not going to want to deal with you. You send him 3 of them and you're history.
You're dead.
Yes. Get him one that says, hey, we can't always be right, but we can always be professional. Short, sweet, to the point. That's the one. So I always read them before I put them in that card. You can bet your bottom dollar I do. So, and that's another thing. We got to be semi-psychologists. You're always trying to match something up to their personality type. Talk about birthdays. Very simple thing. I don't just send them a card. Every year I do something different. When, I did a loan for a guy at a wine and beer store. So I got champagne. I got several cases of champagne. I didn't just get the cheapest champagne. I looked at the best-looking champagne bottle. Okay, so I noticed another guy tried to copy me, and he got the cheapest champagne. It was just a plain white bottle. Well, mine was dark green, white label, red trim, and gold lettering. very high class. I mean, some of the agents, this was 5 years ago, some of the agents still have it on their credenza.
You know what? I just saw a neat one. I have to tell you this. I have a friend of mine a close friend of mine owns Clyde's. It's a restaurant chain in Washington, and we go over. We stay with them all the time, and I was over there looking for a gift. Went into Total Beverage out in McLean, and they there on the shelves there was this wine bottle with from Napa Valley. It was about I don't know, $25 or whatever. Had the most incredible picture of Marilyn Monroe on it that you have ever seen. Probably the best picture that was ever taken of her. It was stunning. She looked professional, beautiful, all the other things. This stuff was just jumping over off the shelves. I bought a case of this stuff and gave it out to clients and friends and whatever, and they still keep it.
What was it called?
I don't know what it was called. Just had this incredible picture, and when you do that, you have to pay the estate, and it's all trademarked and everything like that. But it was just unbelievable. People were, this Total Beverage, for those that don't know, around the country, it probably has 100,000 different brands of wine and everything. And here, people are standing around in a group looking at this incredible thing. So you're right. When you can differentiate your product, it makes a big difference.
Well, besides the champagne, I did that one year. The next year, Cal Ripken hit 21-31. Okay, with his consecutive game streak, when he beat Lou Gehrig.
Sure.
And Wheaties came out with him on the box.
That's right.
Well, I saw it in Sports Illustrated and went straight to the grocery store. And luckily, they just got them in. And I bought 10 cases of them or 15 cases of them. And we created a flyer with a baseball diamond on it and said, we'd send it. And the Realtor newsletter prints the birth dates of all the agents in it every month. All right, so we have our master list. So for those agents and a lot of agents that I deal with, I would do this flyer on there and says, John, you keep going and going, just like Cal. Happy birthday, or whatever. And I would tape that to the Cal Ripken box very gently so it wouldn't rip the box, and I would send it over to them. It's for their birthday.
Great idea.
Yeah, nobody else would think of that. Another year, I just went with a Crestar company pen and Avanti. I found these Avanti cards that were hysterical, and I got a bunch of them, and I used them because they were very hard to find. There was only one place on the Eastern Shore that sold these cards, and so I used that one year. Now, this year, I ran into, at Christmas time, over at Sam's Club, they had these Monopoly coffee mugs, shrink wrapped up with tea and coffee biscuits, special coffee, tea bags in the mugs and sticking out of the mugs, shrink wrapped tied with a ribbon at the top, and one kind is called Boardwalk Brew, which is for my Ocean City agents. The other ones are called Park Place Perk, which I use that for the Salisbury agents. So I got 2 cases of them. I got a few hundred of them because they were only $4.95 each. And I went, this is too good. Actually, I only bought 1 case, and when I went home, I went, this is too good to pass up. I can't. This is so unique. This looks like it cost $20. So I went back and got another case, and I give them to the realtors for their birthday. And everybody loves them to death. And we do it with a birthday banner that we just print out our computer. It's like a 3-foot-long banner that just says, Happy Birthday, John, from Rod and the Crestar team. And it's got a little self-adhesive tapes on the back, and we give them instructions on how to do it. All you do is peel it off and stick it up on your wall. They always stick it up on their wall. They always call and thank them for the mug and the birthday banner. So nobody's going to go to that extent. So maybe that whole thing cost me $7 to do, but man, it's well worth it.
Isn't it amazing? And I think after people listen to enough of these interviews, they're going to pick up a couple things that seem to go in a straight line from the top all the way down, and that is, it's amazing how realtors and clients and agents really like getting these $5, $7 things. It's the fact that you thought enough to get them something.
Well, you go back to the 3 things I talked about. Just as the customers want quick response, personal attention, and simple solutions, so too do the realtors. We all do. You quick response, I'm responding to their pages. The personal attention, I'm giving attention to them personally with the birthdays or their accomplishments. And the simple solutions, I'm doing my pre-qual or my pre-approval, slam, bam, let's go to settlement. So I've accomplished those 3 those three items with my realtors as well. You know, and you're right. I mean, anything. I mean, if I'm in Sam's Club or someplace and I see, you know, like one day I was in there and they had these great Parker pens. I mean, really nice pens. Oh, you know, you could get them in quantity, the bulk quantity, and they're on discount for like $4. I mean, it was like, geez, these things are normally $10. Or Schaefer pens, whatever. I got a whole bunch of them, really nice, and now I save them. I don't bang them all out at once. I save them. I've got a whole four marketing drawers of stuff in there, and I pop them out like, you know, like instead of the Dilbert mints, after I finish doing the Dilbert mints this year, maybe I'll use the pen next year, or I'll use the pen for something else. You know, if you see a deal and you see something that strikes you, and I'm always thinking in terms of, that's why people say, how do you come up with this stuff? Well, I guess maybe I'm always thinking in these terms, because I might see something at the Exxon station in the you know, the little food place, that they got something at the counter that's kind of unique looking, that's maybe something for golf. And I know that, you know, Doug, my realtor, loves to play golf. I mean, he'd think this is humorous, you know. So one day I on a driving range, and I don't play a lot of golf, but I broke the club head off of an old club. And so what did I do? I sanded it off smooth, and I spray painted it gold, and I put it on a piece. And I didn't put it on a piece, but I just sent it to Doug with some joke, because we had played in a tournament a few months before, and I don't know what I said, but you know, just something to let them know that we're thinking of them.
I think where you're headed here, and we're starting to get near the end of our time, is that personal relationships and developing those personal relationships are really a key here.
But you don't overdo it. I mean, then they will tell their in-house mortgage lenders, you know, to say they're just waiting for the time the manager says, well, why don't you deal with the in-house guy? You go, well, what does he do for me? Look at this stuff Flowers does for me. You know, he gives me updates. He, you know, gives me this little trinkets. He sends me, pays for, you know, to play in this golf tournament, or takes me, you know, like the success seminars that Peter Lowe puts on throughout the country.
Right, I've attended them.
I took 10 of the agents to that last year. They thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen. You know, and it was cheap. It was fun, and we all got something out of it.
Was Zig Ziglar on the agenda?
Yeah, Zig was on there.
He's getting a little older now, but he's still great.
Oh yeah, he and Les Brown are like the two best live guys I've ever seen. I mean, and,
yep,
you know,
I couldn't agree more with you, especially on Zig. I'm a big Zig Ziglar fan.
I mean, Zig, even though he'll tell the same stories, you never get tired of hearing him. You know?
Now, and he whips. He's like the Henny Youngman, you know, king of the one-liners. And I mean, he's just sitting there, and it's like I don't take heroin, but I mean, I suspect it's like a heroin rush. I mean, you just listen to stuff, and it just keeps going in, and it's just like adrenaline. Mm-hmm. By the time Zig Ziglar is finished, as you know, I mean, you're just walking out on cloud nine.
That's right.
I'm not sure how much you remember the next day, but you just know you had one hell of an experience.
Well, and it's great for, you know, like when you have to speak at places, and quite often I will speak at, you know, whether it's a realtor meeting or a convention or to our group of loan officers or whatever. I mean, you know, I use Zig quite a lot because I got a bunch of his tapes, and I grab little pieces of, you know, of inspiring information here and there. And, you know, like last year they asked me to kick off a sales rally for 2 days, and they wanted me to get everybody pumped up. Well, I thought of Arnold Schwarzenegger getting pumped up, so I used his accent. I created a character called App Man. I had a Captain America mask, a red turtleneck, a white cape that I spray painted App Man on it, you know, black running tights. But all my content was strictly from Zig Ziglar. You know, I mean, I used all his stuff, just about, you know, you got to get a checkup from the neck up, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and just all kinds of things. But you know, if you write down some of this stuff, you can always use it, and it helps everybody else. Yeah. Going back to the things that you do for the agents and everything, one thing I'd just like to stress is you don't want to.
You get about a minute.
Well, you don't want to overdo it. Okay, you know, you got to be just, you know, you got to think of what will get their attention, but you don't send them some gigantic $150 basket of fruit. You know, something that's just obnoxious. So,
I'd like to kind of end on that high point. Actually, I'd like to end with Zig Ziglar, because it really does put you on a high, and highly recommend those people out there that have a chance to do the Peter Lowe's and Les Browns to take the time to do it. Look, I'd like to thank you very much. This probably went faster in terms of a language than any interview that I've done in a long time. Very profound, a lot of very good points in this, and I really can't thank you enough for taking your time to talk to us.
No, sure. Anytime.
Great. Thanks so much, Rod.
Okay, sir.